System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' in the city left.
Today is Monday, September 9th. I am Amin TMK for Inner City Left alongside my thirsty friend over there, Moja Lil Tanky Sumler. Moja, how you doing today?
Hydrated now.
There you go. We have, I want to say everyone should go out and check our last episode on the rise of Bilal Muhammad. I think it was a fun episode and a fun watch for anybody. We talked about a lot of things, and obviously Keita is always a joy to have. So we want to thank those who already seen it, and if you haven't check it out. But we're back on our BS. You know what's up. I want to talk a little bit about Israel today. As you can see from the description, everything is turned up in the world, and a lot of the fingers point here. So let's talk about this first. We were talking about this morning. Yesterday, 3 Israeli civilians were shot at this Allenby crossing, which is the border between the West Bank and Jordan, by a Jordanian former soldier, I believe. What can you tell us about this? What are your thoughts in any context?
We talk about it all the time, right? It's the word on the street. It's the Arab street is done with this. This has gone on for so long, and they've tried so many mechanisms, right? They reach out to the United Nations. They go to, the League of Arab Nations. All of these things, right? And nothing is happening. I mean, we're working on our 10th month now, going into 11th month now. With October 7th, and we're deep in September now. You know what I'm saying? And so, you get this guy who, of course, I believe military service is mandatory in Jordan. You could better speak on that to me. I'm pretty sure it is.
It is.
They're going to try to tie it to this militant. He was a regular dude. To the best of my understanding, this is a regular dude who drove trucks for a living, who drove across the border into the West Bank, not Israel, mind you, but the West Bank. Something happened. And at that point, and again, who knows, right? What could have been the thing that happened was the continued actions of Israel over the last 11 months. All right. But also it could have been someone said something. He got out of his car. He opened fire and shot 3 Israelis. I don't know if they were civilians. They might have been border guards. Okay, cool. Not cool, but you know what I'm saying? That
it's cool that we've clarified what it is.
Clarified what happened, right? And then this guy was shot to death, right? And now in response, the Israelis have closed the 3 border crossings into the West Bank. From the West Bank that go to Jordan. And this is problematic for a number of reasons, one of which being, why does Israel have control of the West Bank's borders, even after the United Nations and the International Criminal Court of Justice has said that the West Bank is illegally occupied, right? So again, we're not talking about a threat to Israel, the state, because Israel, the state, isn't here. This is the West Bank. But they've used it as a national security issue. They've closed down the border, the 3 crossings. I think about how complicated that's got to be for anybody in the West Bank that works in Jordan, of which we have to assume quite a few. Anybody trying to catch a flight, there are only going to be airports in Jordan for a Palestinian to take. And another thing that really stands out about this whole thing to me is all of the aid shipments that are coming from that direction have to pass through those 3 borders, right? So by shutting those borders down, this is another way that Israel is able to put pressure on Gaza and make sure they don't get any food, any supplies under the auspices, again, of national security. And so, that's fascinating.
The brother of the shooter did say that the war in Gaza could have been a motivating factor. I don't want to speculate, but it is what his brother said. I think we can speak to the general anger that, of course, Arab nations, of course, Muslim nations, but even here in the United States, if you were to get the people to vote right now, do they think there should be a ceasefire or not? And should we do everything in our power to reach a ceasefire? I still think the United States voters would say yes. I don't have much to base it on, but I do know. Yeah.
Nationally trending, the country it has wanted a ceasefire for at least the past 4 months, right? More than 50% of America has wanted to see a ceasefire. It is only the political class, which, just like in this Jordanian situation, you have the Arab Street in Jordan. They're probably like 98% want a ceasefire. And yet you watch the continued capitulation of your king, your government, right? The government's feelings towards these things are not reflective at all of the people's feelings. And we can be like, oh, that's because they have a kingship, but that America is ostensibly a republic, and the desire of the people is not reflected in our leadership either, whether you're talking about a Republican or a Democrat.
Yeah, and this is what's carrying on in a lot of these nations. I think you could probably say the same thing about Jordan for Saudi Arabia. I think you could also maybe say it for Qatar or possibly UAE. You have a separate problem in, places like Egypt, where it supposedly is a democracy. They had to go through a couple presidents before they got to the right one. But we do see that the Egyptian people would probably be up in that 90% for a ceasefire at any cost, I would assume. But 100%. Your king, or sorry, Freudian slip, your president, your general,
president,
the general that became the president.
Not a coup, okay? Not a regime.
No, that's not a regime change, okay? They had a revolution and they picked the president, but that was the wrong one. Then they had another one and picked the president, and that was the wrong one. And then America was like, why don't you use this general? And then everyone said, okay, it's good. So now you have that dealing.
Not a junta, right? If you're on the right side, you are legitimate. And that's the bottom line. When a general takes power and does what the United States wants, you are the duly elected leader. Okay.
Right. So you have all of these. So again, whether you are talking about Western democracy, whether you're talking about sheikhs who run the different emirates, whether you're talking about a prince or a crown prince or a king, it does seem as if the majority of the world is, at least in terms of Palestine. How about this? The Middle East and the West are dealing with this far more, I think, than the global majority. And I mean, obviously, I don't want to blame this on the Middle East, because there is a significant amount of, like, Iraq can't really be, they are at the table, but they can't really be. I mean, their country has been ravaged and it continues to be ravaged. The United States is still in their country. The same thing could be said about Syria. Why do we even need to take you over if we can just destabilize you and keep you out of this war? Remember, Joe Biden said, if you want to get involved, don't.
And speaking of getting involved, though, right? Like, that's something that can actually happen in the Middle East. And that's what happened. This dude had the ability to affect change, and what change looked like to him, and he did. Like, you can't even protest in America. You know what I'm saying? Much less, make a significant change. You can't go to your politician and be like, hey, look, me and all of these constituents will vote against you, right? Because, third party and all that, that's not even, so like if electoral is your thing, they've taken away both of these options as far as a binary goes. However, in the Middle East, it's not that simple. They're much closer to the problem, I think what you brought up was a really, really interesting comparison. Syria, which houses Americans, not at the behest of the Syrian government. In fact, Bashar has went to the United Nations several times and said, the Americans are stealing my oil, not all of which, but a significant portion of which is funding the Israeli miracle, right? Like, so you have American soldiers guarding oil that's going to Israel at an incredibly good price. Which
Trump said this. Remember the whole Trump
inflates their ego. I'm sorry, ego. Wow, Freudian slip. Artificially inflates their economy, right? And so, it's able to look like a paradise on earth. But that's, when you look at Iraq, though, Iraq is totally different. They went to the United Nations. They lied. There were countries that opposed this, up to and including France. Russia opposed this, right? And America invaded anyway. The Iraqi government is on record of having the duly elected, by the way, okay, because Iraq is a republic. Everybody talks about, oh, Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East. That's just not true. Lebanon is a republic. Egypt is ostensibly a republic. And Iraq is certainly a republic. And they have voted for the Americans to be gone. Since 2020, they have consistently voted they don't want an American military presence there. And for 4 years, the Biden administration has just pretty much been like, yeah, we don't fucking care.
We're
Here. Vote us out with your army.
We talked about how much the United States is like, how much the actual cost is for them to be like moving these, aircraft carrier fleets all in and out of the Mediterranean or whatever it may be. But again, this is like a land war right now, right? I mean, this is and I want to talk a little bit about this because, I don't know if this is I don't want to say like the forest for the trees because these are human beings, but I mean, in the West Bank, like they are being treated like it's Gaza, right? Like,
absolutely.
Like what's the difference? It's like West Bank and Gaza. Now, hold on. I know we're going to discuss this. I just want to say like the whole idea, the whole basis of this, just remember the whole thing with going to Iraq was getting weapons of mass destruction, got to stop. It's crazy to think about now, but they had weapons of mass destruction and they were going to use them, right? And they went in and they couldn't find anything. Okay. So now you saying, okay, this was our mission. Our mission was to get the weapons of mass destruction, but there isn't any. Okay. So now you have Bibi Netanyahu saying, okay, our issue is we want to go get Hamas. We want to, what do they like to say? The American State Department degrade leadership. They wanted to degrade their leadership, whatever that meant.
Wonderful piece of rhetoric for a controlled assassination program.
Man.
By the way, according to the records, Americans do not assassinate.
That's pretty incredible. The gaslighting is insane when you talk about the State Department. But the West Bank now, there's no Hamas. They have Fatah. They have this guy Abbas, who is Donald Trump speaks very highly of him. Oh, yeah, he's very easy to work with and all this other stuff. So, I mean, it's like the negative cosign.
Abbas is a fascinating person, as is the Fatah movement, right? So they descend from the PLO tradition, except all the fire and vinegar is gone now, and these guys are just a political party. They are the duly elected political party of the West Bank in the way that Zelensky is, right? Like a long time ago. Like
an election was had before, and they won it at a time.
They won it. And I think that election went back to the Bush years. I think it was literally like 2006 or something, because those are the elections where Fatah won in the West Bank are the same elections where, and this is the part that the State Department doesn't like to acknowledge, the Southern Resistance Party was duly elected in Gaza, right? So like both of these were elected parties. The difference is the Fatah movement has been obsequious to the security demands of Israel, much to the point whereas they're not seen as a party of the people anymore. The reason why there hasn't been an election in the West Bank is quite simply Fatah would never win again, right? So we have to keep this guy in for as long as
they tried that, and that's what they got was Hamas.
Right.
They tried, we don't want you, and now it became Hamas, which again, many people say was also sort of maneuvered in. There was, because again, we needed an enemy. And I think it has to do with, and correct me if I'm wrong or tell me what you think about this, during the Oslo Accords, it was supposed to be winding down this conflict. It really was supposed to be like, okay, we're now going to elect people who are like bureaucrats, who are like willing to work within this rules-based order, because that was what was supposed to happen. And literally the Gaza and the West Bank split because they saw it at different times. Hey, this isn't going to work for us. Nothing is happening. You can go back to the conversation with the Jordanian gunman. There is a boiling point that people have when their needs are not being met. We see college students protesting here in the United States and all over the world. People are willing to want to show their displeasure. And when they show their displeasure and nothing changes, well, then what should the people do? Even if in France they voted and it didn't work. So,
I mean, yeah,
what are you supposed to do?
That's absolutely fascinating. And we have not given that the time it needs yet. I just do need, for those of you that are watching, God bless you and thank you. We do the most to try to bring y'all the geopolitical news that you need of stuff that's happening around the world. So we talked about it a little while ago. France had snap elections. Macron.
They can always follow us on Inner City Left where we update a lot more.
There it is. Macron's party had snap elections. Macron is the president of France. His party didn't come in first place. His party didn't come in second place. They came in third place. But the president gets to pick the prime minister. Now, traditionally, right, since the founding of what is called the Fourth Republic, because France has been a republic 4 times, it's failed 3 times before, right? But since the founding of the Fourth Republic, no president has ever not picked from the party that won. So he didn't pick from the first party because they were too leftist. He didn't pick from the second party because those are his political rivals. He didn't pick from his party because that would be, in poor taste coming in at third. No, he picked a prime minister from the party that came in 4th place. And so, there are huge protests all through France right now because it's like, what is the point of voting if we vote for these people and we supposedly defeat them at the poll box and then the same old centrists, which are really right wingers, come in and undo all of that effort. And that's what Macron has done, right? And again, this is what we have to look at if there were to be elections in the West Bank, because it wouldn't be Hamas that wins, but someone not Fatah will win. And again, they have an investment. The West has an investment in Fatah because they feel like they're relatively predictable. They know what they can and cannot accept. And it's much more. They can accept way more than any other political party representing the Palestinians right now on the ground. And the people know that, and the people would vote otherwise. I do want to say one more thing. You brought up the Syrian troops and the Iraqi American troops, right? They exist not just for the oil. All of it connects back to the grand Western colonial experiment of Israel. Because what are those troops really there for? It's not sexy to talk about, but the fact is they are what is called a tripwire force. They are there to be used in case of an emergency break, and that's those American troops. In case there was ever some massive military movement coming from Iran, right? Those troops in Iraq, those troops in Syria exist to detect what is coming and to defend it for Israel until Israel is able to do it and further American reinforcements are able to come and salvage the situation. As an American, that bothers me. That bothers me because someone that from the hood that joins the military ostensibly, maybe just because they love America, maybe because they want to not pay for their college, right? Maybe just willing to die for America. Ain't nothing in there that says you're willing to die for Israel. And that shouldn't have to be a condition of employment in the armed forces. I mean, that shouldn't even be a radical position, right? That people join the military and then your lives are literally used as a cushioning buffer against any type of inconvenience that Israel might suffer. And meanwhile, Israel continues to provoke their neighbors. I mean, just over the last 48 hours, they've bombed Syria again. These are highly provocative acts. No one would understand if Syria was regularly bombing Tel Aviv. You can say that forces associated with Syria, you can conjecture, right? But Israel literally puts their flag out and goes and bombs places in Syria, and then they still say Israel has the right to defend itself. You're on offense. When you're on offense, you're not defending yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me, and let me know how you feel about this, it's just this perfect storm because Benjamin Netanyahu we talked about this years ago. It's over for Netanyahu. He's done. We got all these corruption charges. There are so many people within the government that want to see him gone. And here he is, unable to, or unwilling, I should say, to stop this war because his entire political life. His life maybe possibly is on the line here. So that's not going to stop. You have the United States that's willing. There is no party there that is against, at least not the two major parties. There's no one in the two that agree that Palestine should, or there should be maybe a weapons embargo, an immediate weapons embargo, which I think many people are asking for, even though I don't think it's likely. You are doing things like creating a situation where polio is back. Polio is back in Gaza. That is insane. Literally, first of all, this was a few weeks ago. And now, because of that, they are trying to do their best to vaccinate, quote, people from polio. Israel has a long tradition of medical violence, or I don't know what you want to call it. I mean, unethical medical practices, sterilizing people.
Vaccinating populations, they sterilized a good portion of the Ethiopian women that were Jews that came to live in Israel without their consent. Again, these should be screaming. The American feminists should be beating their hearts about these kind of things, and you don't hear about it at all, right? Because again, what happens to brown women, what happens to black women around the world is never quite as important, right? It just doesn't stick with us in the same way.
Right.
And utilizing this whole polio out, like that's a terrifying thing to think about with a country that has already expressed an urge to take Jenny to the side. You know what I'm saying? Now being in control of the medicines that come in and out of this country, like because they've already violated trust as far as vaccination programs go. And what's your choice, right? Hope and pray that nobody's done anything to these medicines, right? Or watch your child maybe get polio, you know?
Yeah. So here's the craziest thing about it, because that in of itself is a conundrum that's very difficult for anyone to work through. Again, most people don't have to deal with these type of choices in their lives. You know, liberals don't have to deal with these type of crazy choices in their lives. Israel is bombing the vaccination sites. Like how it's cartoonishly evil. And because of this, because there's no, like, you cannot be a moral, ethical person and still side with Israel, I think, at this point, even though I see it every day when I go through Northwest DC, tons of white people with, oh my God, I'm so sorry that I just had to mention this, because the other day we were driving, we were coming, you see where I got with this? We were driving down in, Northwest DC, and we see a sign in the yard that says Harris Waltz. And right next to that sign, it says I can't remember if it was in the genocide now or G-side, or it was ceasefire now. But it's like they were right next to each other. Ceasefire now. Okay. So you have Waltz Harris, ceasefire now.
These things does not belong.
So they don't compute. They don't work. And I don't understand. Again, I just go back to this point. The Never Trumpers said, I'd never vote for Trump. Someone shot at him and they changed their minds. Everyone said Joe Biden was the worst candidate of all time. No policies changed. Just Kamala came in and everyone's down for a Kamala. So it just lets you know that all this matters is just symbolism. And I think that goes with a lot of what's happening in the West Bank is their government has just been a symbolic government for so long, not really doing anything other than staying on message and doing what Israel needs them to do. I want to mention this other thing, too, because we've been talking about the death toll for quite some time. You don't know because there's no journalism there. They killed all the journalists. They bombed all the hospitals.
More journalists have died in the last year in the West Bank and in Gaza than died in the entirety of World War II.
The stats are crazy. Every time you look at the stats are crazy. Again, I go the worst. We call it a G-side for a reason.
It would take Russia to be at war with the Ukrainians for 20 more years to equal this number.
So let's talk about civilian casualties because it's all over the place. But there was a letter written from the doctors that volunteered in Gaza. They say the death toll is now over 92,000. And then they updated that saying it's probably 3 to 15 times more than that. And they estimated at 368,000 Palestinians. There was 2.5 million people living in Gaza. It's close to a 400,000 number. This is an incredible loss of life. This is an incredible part of, and again, it goes back to the point of this video. What's happening is so vile and horrific that it is breaking the world. Everyone is protesting. All peoples all over the world are protesting. People are just walking up to the, we could talk about Aaron Bush now, that this is what our leaders have decided is going to be normal. And it is absolutely bringing the world to its knees everywhere you go, whether it's Europe. And then we got to hear about Venezuela. All of this stuff, we got to hear about Venezuela like they're the bad guys. This death toll is insane. And the other thing I wanted to ask you too, this is from The Cradle, really good publication. Check it out.
Banned on Meta.
Yeah, banned. Meta don't like that, and neither does Jujul. Hamas rebuilds forces in northern Gaza, recruits 3,000 fighters. It doesn't seem as if the manpower is going anywhere. It just seems like they're killing civilians. They're not degrading the leadership. And it reminds me of this, like during the Obama years where it was like a drone every Monday. He was like, or like Sunday, it was like a little plan. Who are we going to drone today? You have so many people who were at a wedding, or they were at a soccer game, or they were just visiting their family in a house, and a drone came in and killed everybody in the room, or killed most people, or defigured people who had nothing to do with this, completely innocent. And when that happens, there's an aspect of vengeance to humanity. You know what I'm saying? Not that I advocate for it, not that I'm saying I'm here for violence, but wouldn't you, or don't you understand people who are upset when their entire family has been killed and now turn to a life of militancy?
Yeah, I mean, the black guy that white people love to quote the most is Martin Luther King, right? And what does he say? When you make nonviolent protest impossible, you make violent revolution inevitable. And this is what you're continuing to see. Like, it's hard to look at these numbers because they represent something that goes beyond Jenny, right? Way beyond that. You're talking about literally trying to wipe a people off the face of the earth in a way whereas they will have never existed. Not just the people, their culture, the buildings, right? When you're attacked, I mean, think about this. The Germans didn't bomb Stonehenge, right? But you have Israeli forces blowing up mosques that are 1,500 years old, churches that are 2,000 years old, right? Like, no one has the right to take these kind of things. Like, no one does, right? What was that little movie with George Clooney a couple of years ago? We have to save the arts. The Nazis. Meanwhile, you have the Israelis literally razing universities to the ground.
Right? And hospitals, every hospital. I mean, remember not too long ago, it was, you didn't bomb it. It was the other team. I mean, that's just gone. You have Kamala Harris coming out and repeating these same, sexual assault stories that are just completely debased at this point.
Which is, again, right? So again, you're not realistic. You're not honest about these things, because if that was something that was part of your core praxis, then you would have comments about the stories of what has happened to the Palestinian detainees. And there's been way too many incidents of exactly that type of violation, and she's had nothing to say about it, right? But when you end up so to the right, where the progressives don't care, the so-called progressives in the Democratic Party, you have people like AOC being used as an attack dog on Jill Stein, even though she stole the Green New Plan from the Green Party.
Green New Deal, yeah.
Green New Deal, right? It's literally in the name, right? But meanwhile, people like Kamala are getting endorsed by Dick Cheney, who is like one of the most terrifying human beings in the world. Like, he's more okay with Kamala than he is with Trump, right? And so what does that tell you? That should tell you there are no progressive options on the Republican, and I don't even like to talk Democratic, Republican electoral politics, because it's a waste of my fucking time. But I mean, these kind of things, when a trend is that crazy, you have to speak on that. Dick Cheney right? That's where the Democrats are right now. And so that should tell you she's not going to be better. She's the perfect vessel for the state because she will say exactly what she is told to say without interjecting her own ego into the process. It seems enough to her to be the first woman president, right? It seems enough to her that's all that matters. So long as I achieve that one goal, right? We haven't heard anything from her that's her vision of what America is. Simply continuation of the policies that already exist or making them worse.
Yeah, she actually released some I don't want to call them policies. They're far from it. Actually released some stuff on her website where she said she was going to raise minimum wage. No number of what.
She literally had an opportunity to do that. So there's nothing that makes me believe she would do that now.
You're so right. I just want to say this. During the, I think it was like, I can't remember, it was a spending bill of some kind early when Joe Biden came.
I'm sorry, the first 100 days.
Yeah. And there was the budget thing, and they had this unelected official, a parliamentarian, who can make recommendations. And she recommended that the minimum wage, which was set to $15 an hour, be taken out. Now, she's unelected and doesn't matter. Kamala Harris has the ability to go, we don't care about what you say because I get to decide. So Kamala Harris, instead of deciding to put $15 out, it was literally that simple. She chose to listen to the unelected parliamentarian. And it just go back to your point, and the point I think that many people are trying to make is there really is no way to affect change if you are voting for the Republicans or Democrats.
It's not fair because the Republicans get what they want. The Republicans had the repeal of Roe v. Wade. They get what they want.
Right. Some of them. I mean, I don't think everyone who's Republican is like interested, is like
that's
deeply attracted to these conservative ideas. I think also Republicans would like, the ability to buy a house or buy land or, again, I don't want to, you know what I'm saying? Like, so like, I do agree that there are some far right sort of the evangelical votes and all these people, like they vote for pro-life and all those other things. And, the border, but the border, you can't even say is a conservative thing anymore because Kamala wants to win on that.
Well, but she's conservative. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't not call it not conservative because a Democrat said it, especially a Democrat that came up under Uncle Joe segregation. You know what I'm saying? That's where we are right now. The people that vote Democrat are like Charlie Brown, Chase and Lucy. I'm going to hold the football down this time. And if that's what you went to, that's great.
And Israel is further proving why the United States doesn't care about what the general electorate says. And I think that's what we're saying. Like, Israel is breaking the world. It's forcing everyone to make a decision on what type of person do you want to be. Are you a person that, can say, I am actually okay with G side as long as my team wins and I feel like I feel like, identity politics is working towards me. We get this stupid thing all the time where people are like, woke agenda. It's the woke agenda. And it's like, do you not understand that identity politics has just become a wedge? That doesn't mean that diversity is bad. It just means that people who all agree with the same policies, it doesn't matter what color you are because the identity is irrelevant in those ways. And I just think that it's conservatives, man, it's stupid stuff that they say.
It's wonderful to break down from a rhetorical point of view, but it is a distraction ultimately, right? Because, and I've spoken about this at length. I've written essays about this. Look, identity can be a marker that should cue you for certain experiences, but it doesn't always do that. There's always the exceptional person that doesn't have to pay those. Those are class distinctions that come in that affect all of those things. And at the end of the day, what matters is not the way someone looks, but the way that they think. And if everyone thinks the same that's in those positions of power, I don't care how they look. Like, if you're enacting policy that makes Dick Cheney happy, I don't care what other identities you carry upon yourself. If you're helping a messianic Israel who's showing maps where the West Bank is completely removed, and that's the middle ground map, right? You look at the greater Israel map and Lebanon's gone, most of Syria's gone, Jordan is gone, a good portion of Saudi Arabia is gone because they're basing it on, oh my God, the historical boundaries from King Solomon 3,500 years ago, like that's a problem. Like if you're not willing to stop Israel now, that's a problem because what you're doing then is when those people put those maps up, and we're not talking about citizens, we're talking about people like Bibi Netanyahu, who was a head of state, right? Who was stating an intention to do a thing, right? We always have to hear about, Russia is expansionist when it's like, again, Ukraine and Russia they're so intertwined as a culture that their literal ethnicity is called the Kievan Rus, right? They come from this tribe. This is not what's happening in Israel. They're not coming from the same tribe as Jordanians. They're not coming from the same tribe as Syrians, right?
They're coming from Philadelphia.
They're coming
New York, Williamsburg, and Poland.
Talking about their divine right to take Lebanon, their divine right to take Jordan. Like, you're advocating for ethnic cleansing. If you're unwilling to speak,
and they don't want a ceasefire. It's not like Russia and Ukraine where the ceasefire is they're begging for it. The Russia, who is winning the war, is like, do y'all want to do a ceasefire? We kind of tired of doing this. And they keep escalating. And it's like no ceasefires anywhere for any reason. Why do we have negotiators? What's the point of this?
Literally invaded Russia. Wow. Floating peace talks to the Russians. Like then it makes the Russians do these overreactions, right? Like, but again, we've talked about that enough. I'm trying to keep it on Israel. You just have to see that all of this stuff is connected. You cannot feel one way about one of these things and then totally be oblivious to the stated aims of what the Israeli government is representing right now. And no Republican candidate and no Democratic candidate is willing to do this.
Yeah. I want to give a shout out to our podcast listeners. We're available everywhere you find podcasts: Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Player FM, the deal, what's up. I want to give a shout out to our patrons. You can follow us and support us on Patreon. We also have free stuff, but if you got some money, go ahead and throw us some. I want to give a shout out to Kelly, Dubsy22, Nicole, Jay Goulart, 94, No Ground, RK, Paula, Lissa, Dennis, Suzette, and Lauren. Y'all the best. Bro, thoughts, feelings, closing statement?
Like and follow us on every place that exists. And this is not just like to keep the numbers up. You just don't know what platforms are going to be here day after day. And the best way to stay up to date with what we're doing at Any City Left is follow everywhere, man. You know what I'm saying? The ops do. Be smart like the ops. Follow us everywhere.
Follow us everywhere, just like the Alphabet Boys. Amin, TMK, Mojo, Little Tanky, Sumler, Inner City Left. Peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' Inner City Left.